what can you tell us about your, let's say, between commas, tricks to work in a hospital full of medicine doctors?
Two things. Be brave, be humble. What do I mean? Be brave enough to put yourself forward to work in a hospital. If you get rejected in 1, 2, 3, doesn't matter, keep trying. Be brave enough to put yourself forward. Why do I say be humble? Don't try to show off. It doesn't work. Be humble. Suggest that you might be able to help people in pain. That's enough. Don't talk about the tremendous philosophy of osteopathy. They're not interested in that. They really don't want to hear about all that. Just try to understand that they are doctors, and they think that we who have not studied medicine are very much inferior. Okay. Just eat humble pie, we say in England, and present your work as something that may help people in pain. If you get that foot in the door, then you will slowly start to prove yourself that you will be able to help people, and they will take notice, and they will be happy that someone is there that they can trust, will not do harm to the patient, and that they can send all their difficult cases to when they've put up their hands and says, I can't do anything more for you, or I'm too frightened to give you more dangerous drugs. Go to see Miguel. He may be able to help you. That's a lovely moment. But you have to be humble. You have to accept that we will never be accepted equally. Even me, after 30 years, 20 years in my present hospital, I'm not accepted as an equal when it comes to the real crunch. When we discuss a difficult patient, they still won't give me straight away, as a first physician, the difficult patient. It's only usually when they've failed with the difficult patients that I get the patient. So even after 20 years, they still want to use their drugs. They still want to inject. They want to do the minor operations first, unless it's a case that might be too dangerous to do those things to. Then I get the patient quite quickly. But usually, I get the patient at the end. In English, it's called the heart sink patients, the patients that make your heart sink when they come in the door. Oh, what am I going to do with this patient? That's the ones that you will get if you work in a hospital.
Thank you. And this leads me to another question is, what can osteopathy do for people who are in pain and distress, people who do search osteopathic treatment? What can, in your thinking, can they expect from osteopathy today?
Firstly, I think you must say, don't expect anything. I may not be able to help you, but I will try. And whatever I do will not harm you. For most patients who come to you, it's because they already heard you have a good name. They already want to know whether you can help them. But you're being honest with them. And you're saying, I may be able to help you. I very much want to try. I will do you no harm, but all medicine, including osteopathy, is a trial. No one knows beforehand if you will really help them. I'm willing to try. You determine what the problem is clinically, and you can then tell them this may take longer or this may take less time. I may need to see you for a trial of at least a month, or I may say to the patient, you are so seriously ill, you have been to see so many doctors for so many years, it will take me at least 6 months, 9 months of rehabilitation before we will begin to see that you are getting better seriously, significantly. There are patients who will run away and still look for the miracle. But many patients will say, okay, let's make a start. Let's begin with 2 months of treatment or a month's treatment, once a week, twice a week, and let's see if we're getting somewhere. The beautiful thing about working in the hospital is that they pay very little. so the patient doesn't feel that they're going to waste a lot of money. And that is a tremendous advantage when you can say to a patient, I want to see you twice a week or 3 times a week for the next month. I cannot expect to do anything unless I have that amount of work with you. And they do the calculation in their head, how many dollars or euros or whatever it's going to cost, and it's okay, they can manage it because the hospital fee is very, very limited. So that's one of the joys of working in a hospital, that you know you're not going to make it difficult financially for the patient to try the trial of osteopathy.
And this is the real spirit of the osteopathy, at least at start.
Exactly. But I can tell you something else. You can do it in your private practice as well if you have the courage. What do I mean? You're charging a good fee in private practice, but you know you must see that patient for the first month or the first 3 weeks, twice or 3 times a week. And you know that will be difficult for them to pay a high fee 3 times a week. I promise you, if you say to the patient, I need to see you 3 times a week, I will cut the fee down by a third for the week, so that I can see you and you do not have any financial difficulties. I promise you, your practice will build and build and build because of your good name. People will talk and say, this is an honest man. This is a man who is trying to help and who's not doing his work for the money, just for the money. It's amazing, quite amazing. I couldn't have put myself in the worst place to build up a private practice. I was living in Jerusalem for 10 years. That was wonderful. I came, and within 3-4 months, I was so busy because you're in the middle of a city and there were no other osteopaths in Jerusalem when I came 30 years ago. 20 years ago, we decided we want to live in the countryside, up on a mountain, in the hills. Better weather, better climate. So we decided to choose a little village on a mountaintop, surrounded by other villages, little villages, no big city for miles. No one's heard of osteopathy. It was the biggest mistake I thought I made in my life. The first 2 years, I had hardly any patients. Nobody knew me, nobody heard of osteopathy. I quickly realized I must work, so I went to the hospital 3 days a week. And I went to my brother's practice. My brother's a doctor, so he let me use his practice as well, in the city of Haifa. But after 2 or 3 years, the name began to spread. Good work doesn't make it difficult to pay a fee. And gradually, people in the villages knew that I was there. And the doctors started to send me patients that were working in the area. So it did begin to build, and it did begin to grow. So I've never been worried in the long run that a good name will make all the difference.
Okay, today I think that people were attending the conference. Those who knew a little about the history of osteopathy, they were a little envy of you for having those masters you had in your life. And those who know a little more, I think they have lots of jealous of your something about these 2 men that you had the privilege to be working with. And what can you transmit to our generation of osteopaths?
Firstly, they must not be envious of me, because I went through hell with both of them. What do I mean? John Werner didn't accept me straight away. I had to beg him and write him letters and tell him I'll work for nothing. When I started to work for him, he made my life very difficult. He didn't like me. He saw that I was too keen, too enthusiastic to learn, and he wanted to keep me at a distance. It was nothing to be envious of. Winter in England is cold. His place was a Victorian building with no central heating, just heating above the beds, electric bars. I would sleep there overnight so as to be ready the next morning before he gets to work at 7:30 in the morning. I couldn't come from London, it would be too far away. So I would sleep there. He wouldn't let me use the heating. I would be sleeping on the bed with blankets and blankets. I could see my breath, you know, it was so cold. Cold shower in the morning, no hot water. Real old-fashioned English, British
It was the same
attitude.
building that we went to.
Yes, the same building, but not as nice as when you saw it.
I can imagine that.
It was very run down. And I lived under those conditions for about 3 years. I would not give up. Then one day he had an accident. He fell off his bicycle coming to work. He used to come to work on his bicycle. And he injured his whole leg and his knee. By then, everybody else that had worked in his clinic left, because he also treated the others very badly. They didn't want to stay and work under those conditions. I was the last person helping in the clinic, in his clinic. So he had nobody else to turn to. He asked me to treat him. I began to treat him. I got a bit of a shock. The shock was that I was treating him the way he treats me. That is, I was getting treatment from him, learning during my treatment, and I did the same to him. Very similar. From that day, he didn't let me have a week without his getting a treatment. Whether I was ready, not ready, tired, ill, he had to have his treatment. That was a big compliment. And then he began to talk more sensibly to me, nicely. He didn't just, make bad jokes about me. Patients were giving him good feedback from the clinic, patients that he respected. So things began to improve with John Waldman. But that was after at least three very difficult things. Then I wanted to see his teacher, Edward Hall, to get some experience from him.
Because I think he has this famous for being high-tech.
But he didn't accept me either. I wrote letter after letter after letter. I began to show him that I know my osteopathy because I would ask questions in my letter about Fryette in particular, which was Hall's great teacher, apart from Little John. And then I turn to Wernham and I say, John, help me. Get to Edward Hall, to your teacher. He's not accepting me with my letters. So John Wernham wrote him a letter, maybe telephoned him and said, give him a chance. And from that day, Hall said, okay, come to me on the weekend, on Saturdays. And I would go down to his home on a train, and I began to learn with him. Now, he was much nicer to me once I began to work with him. But again, it's nothing to be envious when you have to try so hard to see somebody you want to learn from. Luckily, I had him for 2 years before he died. The last 2 years of his life, he was happy to teach me. Interestingly, he gave up teaching at least 10 or 15 years earlier because he was fed up with students. Why was he fed up with students? Very simple. Students would come to him, like Siran said earlier, because they wanted to know how to do technique. But he noticed they weren't interested in why, the principles behind it, the philosophy behind it. They just want to know, how do you do this? How do you do that? But not when, why, in what circumstances, what indications. And he said, no more, I'm fed up. I'm not giving my knowledge to people who just want tricks, to be clever tricksters. So he stopped teaching students.
That reminds me of this story of his students wanting to crack bones, and he cracked the complete body of the patient and said, now you go and find the osteopathic lesion.
Correct. Very good.
With British accent.
Yes.
Yeah. One more question, if you don't mind. What do you think will be the future of osteopathy, and which will be your advice for better osteopathic treatment for our patients, for learning, for practicing, and what will be the biggest mistakes we can make?
Sure, those are three questions, three big questions. Yeah. What do I think will happen to osteopathy? I fear it will disappear. I truly do think the osteopathy that I love will disappear. The name won't disappear. The Americans will preserve it in some way. well, actually, it can disappear in America as well. But I think classical osteopathy is on a very thin string. It's just being held alive at the moment. So it's touch and go. It all depends if the next generation will be inspired by what they are taught when they come to classical workshops and classical courses. That was the first question. The second question you asked
is what we have to teach,
yes.
And what do people have to learn to keep it the best osteopathy for the future, because we are not interested in
yes.
bad medicine of any kind.
Well, actually, I think students today have a tremendous opportunity to learn classical osteopathy that I never had. There are courses and teachers, and there are videos, and there are books, which I never had. So the material is available. It's up to the teachers to make it enthusiastic for them, make it something that they will be enthusiastic about. That's the art of teaching. But the material is available like never before.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And it was also my pleasure.
Till we meet again.
Yes.